Ancient Rome promised marble, order, and civilization. But if you were poor, the city greeted you with smoke in your lungs, damp in the walls, old sweat in the dark, and the quiet fear that your building might kill you before the day was over. Before sunrise, the gap between rich and poor was already disgusting. One Roman woke to bread, perfume, and servants moving in silence. Another woke stacked inside a swaying insula, listening for shouting below, cracks above, and any sign that a single spark could turn home into a coffin. You do not wake gently. You wake because somebody downstairs is already shouting, because a baby is crying through a wall as thin as cheap wood, because someone on the stairway has spilled something that smells sour and human, because sleep is always shallow when one spark can turn your entire building into a furnace. The rich worry about politics and inheritance. You worry that the beam above your head might crack before midday. Your insula rises too high, too crowded, too cheaply built. Every floor making the next one hotter, shakier, and more dangerous. The higher you live, the cheaper the rent, and the greater the chance that a single bad night ends with your body in the street, beside broken pottery and smoking timber. At almost the same hour, in a domus with painted walls and polished floors, another Roman opens his eyes to filtered light and trained silence. The air around him carries oil, perfume, warm bread, and the faint sweetness of stored wine. Servants have already moved before he even stirs. Water has been carried, sandals are placed, clothing is ready. Nothing about his morning depends on luck. The city's dirt exists for him only as something removed, wiped, hidden, or endured by somebody else. Rome appears cleaner when another person spends their back, lungs, and time keeping filth away from your sight. That is the real divide Rome hides best. The rich did not live in a different empire. They lived at a safer distance from its smell, its noise, its labor, and its risk. The poor felt the city directly, on the stairs, in the air, in the water bucket cutting into the hand, in the heat trapped under the roof, in the public humiliation of needing everything and owning almost nothing. Rome's glory was shared as spectacle. Its filth was shared as burden. You begin your day by going after water, because survival in Rome starts with carrying things. There is no private fountain waiting in your room. There is a public source, and between you and it stands a stairway slick with grime, neighbors equally desperate, and the daily humiliation of needing the city before the city has remembered you exist. The bucket cuts into your fingers. The line smells of wet stone, unwashed cloth, and stale breath. Someone pushes forward. Someone argues. Someone has brought a cracked jar and hopes it lasts one more morning. The rich can speak about Roman engineering with pride. You feel that engineering as weight sloshing against your leg before breakfast. Food makes the contrast even crueler, because both rich and poor are hungry in the morning, but only one of them can trust hunger to end pleasantly. In a wealthy household, breakfast may be small, but it is certain. Bread arrives fresh. Cheese is clean. Fruit is not a miracle. Honey is a choice, not a dream. For you, food depends on yesterday's wages, today's prices, and whether the grain sellers are honest, generous, or simply less cruel than usual. Your bread may already be tough. Your olives may be bruised. Your porridge may be thin enough to feel like an insult. What matters is not taste. What matters is whether the ache in your stomach quiets enough to let you work without shaking. Then there is the street. Rome does not smell the same from above as it does from inside it. The wealthy move through the city with escorts, litters, sandals that stay cleaner longer, and the confidence of people who can leave quickly. You move through packed alleys where smoke from braziers mixes with donkey sweat, frying oil, rotting scraps, damp wool, fish sauce, urine, and the drifting stink of places where too many people live too close together. Every shop adds its own layer. Tanneries bite at the nose. Dye works hang heavy in the throat. Food stalls tempt and disgust at the same time. The city feels alive, but not in a poetic way. Alive like something overcrowded, overheated, and always one day away from turning ugly. Privacy is another luxury Rome reserves for those who can buy distance. A rich Roman can close doors, retreat to an interior courtyard, hold a conversation without the entire building hearing it, and relieve himself without stepping into public filth. You live in a world where nearly everything leaks into everything else. sound leaks, smell leaks, heat leaks, shame leaks. If somebody fights, everyone knows. If somebody is sick, everyone hears it. If someone cannot make it to a latrine in time, the evidence becomes communal. Public toilets offer little dignity, only necessity. You sit beside strangers, trading silence over the same stone seats, the same sour air, the same reminder that even your most private needs are handled like a shared burden. The rich do not escape discomfort entirely, but they purchase softer versions of it. Heat meets them through shaded courtyards and carefully timed routines. Cold meets them with heavier cloth and braziers that do not have to be carried up 6 flights by their own arms. Dirt meets them through sandals worn by slaves, not cracked feet stepping over refuse. Their problem is inconvenience. Yours is exposure. If rain comes, your room leaks. If winter bites, smoke from a cheap fire chokes the little warmth you can afford. If summer settles hard over the city, the upper floors of your building trap heat like punishment. Sleep becomes sweat. Sweat becomes rash. Rash becomes one more thing to ignore because missing work is worse. And work is where the lie of Roman greatness becomes hardest to ignore. Marble temples and triumphal arches do not rise by magic. Roads are not laid by senators. Cargo is not unloaded by poets. Someone carries, hauls, scrubs, lifts, cuts, sweats, and coughs the empire into existence. Usually that someone is closer to you than to the men who praise Rome's glory in the Forum. Day labor means your body is your only reliable possession, and even that wears down fast. A sore back is not a complaint. It is a warning you cannot afford to hear. Hands split, knees harden, shoulders burn. Tomorrow still expects the same effort. Meanwhile, wealth in Rome often looks effortless because effort has been pushed out of sight. The elite man discussing philosophy over watered wine can seem refined, disciplined, almost above bodily reality. But the illusion works only because other bodies absorb the dirt. A slave cleans the lamp soot. Another empties the chamber pot. Another washes the tunic. Another stands in the kitchen where heat and grease cling to the skin. Another runs messages through crowded streets. Another waits at the door. Comfort in Rome is rarely the absence of filth. It is the successful transfer of filth onto lives considered less important. Even clothing tells the story. The rich wear fabric that signals leisure, status, and distance from grime, even when the city around them is coated in it. Whiter cloth means somebody else worked harder to keep it white. Cleaner sandals mean somebody else walked the dirt first. A neat appearance in Rome is not merely fashion. It is proof that you have servants, time, water, storage, and social power. Your clothing, by contrast, records the day like a witness. Dust on the hem, oil at the cuff, sweat darkening the cloth, stitching repaired too many times. Fabric holding yesterday because you cannot spare enough water, soap, or daylight to erase it. The humiliation of poverty in Rome is not only that life is hard, it is that life is hard in public. Hunger can be seen. Exhaustion can be seen. Cheap shoes, rough hands, patched clothes, bad teeth, and the posture of someone always carrying more than he owns can all be read instantly. The city is full of spectators. Wealth is theatrical, but poverty is exposed. When an elite patron walks out to receive greetings, clients gather early, presenting respect in hopes of coin, favor, or leftovers from influence. You stand there among them, not because dignity means nothing to you, but because dignity alone does not buy bread. Rome teaches dependence, then mocks the dependent for looking desperate. Even entertainment reveals the gap. Public spectacles may appear generous, a grand civic gift open to all, but the experience is never equal. Better seats belong to those with rank. Shade belongs to those with importance. Access follows status the same way everything else does. The poor may enter, but not as equals. You are part of the crowd, part of the noise, part of the proof that Rome is magnificent. The elite are there to be seen seeing it. A grand arena, a race, a public ceremony. All of it tells the same story in stone. The empire includes you, but only as weight, only as numbers, only as evidence that someone else stands above a great mass looking down. By midday, the city is louder, hotter, and less forgiving. Traffic presses through the streets. Animals strain, vendors shout. Flies gather wherever food, blood, or waste has lingered too long. A rich Roman can disappear behind walls when the noise grows tiring. You remain inside it, cooked by the day. Even rest feels different depending on class. In a fine house, a pause can mean cool water, a shaded room, a servant fanning stale heat away. In your world, a pause means sitting on stone, guarding your tools, and trying not to spend money on food you cannot justify. Fatigue in Rome is not universal. Some recover from it. Others simply return to it tomorrow a little weaker. Then there is medicine, or rather, the uneven chance of survival when the body fails. Wealth cannot guarantee health, but it can buy attention, quieter rooms, better food during recovery, and people whose job is to care whether you live comfortably. Poverty offers almost none of that. If you fall ill, the room where you sleep becomes a trap of heat, closeness, and stale air. The sick rest beside the healthy because there is nowhere else to put them. Water still has to be fetched. Rent still exists. Work still vanishes the moment you cannot stand. Rome admires strength, but for the poor, strength is often just the name given to not having the option to collapse. Fire is perhaps the purest symbol of the difference between rich and poor in the city. For the wealthy, it is danger. For you, it is destiny waiting nearby. Cooking flames, lamps, crowded rooms, timber beams, narrow stairways, and buildings packed too tightly together turn every evening into a gamble. When fire starts in a poor district, people do not just lose property, they lose the little proof that they existed at all. A pot, a blanket, a wooden chest, a handful of tools, gone. The rich may lose an investment, a warehouse, an inconvenience that can be rebuilt. You lose your place in the world and wake the next day with smoke in your throat and nowhere left to return to. Water itself divides the classes in subtler ways. Rome is famous for its supply, and fairly so, but access is not the same as ease. Public fountains serve many, yet private pipes and household storage change what water means inside a rich home. For the wealthy, water can become comfort, display, even pleasure. For the poor, it remains labor. Every bucket represents time and strain. Every wash is a calculation. Do you clean your face, your clothes, your floor, or your cooking pot? Not all of them. Not enough of them. Dirt lingers not because the poor are careless, but because cleanliness takes resources, and resources are exactly what poverty withholds. The same is true for smell, which in Rome functions almost like social rank you can sense before you see it. A rich household works constantly to produce a smell of order: oil, herbs, fresh bread, cleaned cloth, incense, polished wood. The poor cannot control the air around them with the same authority. Smoke from cooking, sweat from labor, dampness trapped in walls, waste from nearby streets, fish sauce spilled in the market, animals passing too close, leather soaking somewhere out of sight. The city settles into your skin whether you welcome it or not. To smell poor in Rome is not merely to neglect yourself. It is to wear your environment because you have no power to refuse it. When evening comes, the difference sharpens again. In a fine house, dinner can stretch into conversation, display, gossip, strategy, and indulgence. Reclining guests eat more than they need while lamps burn steadily and dishes arrive in sequence. The meal itself becomes performance. For you, evening asks a harsher question. How much energy remains after surviving the day? Bread, onions, a little porridge, maybe beans, maybe something salted if fortune has bent your way. The meal is not a stage, it is maintenance. You eat to delay weakness. You eat with tomorrow already pressing on the back of your neck. Luxury measures time by pleasure. Poverty measures it by recovery. Night should make everyone equal, but Rome does not even allow that mercy. Darkness hides beauty and ugliness alike, yet it does not hide risk. The rich sleep behind doors, courtyards, guards, and thicker walls. You climb back toward your room through stairways that groan beneath the weight of too many lives. Lamps flicker, shadows move. The smell of old smoke never leaves. Noise from the street rises in waves. Arguments, footsteps, distant laughter. A cart passing where it should not. A dog barking at nothing you can see. You lie down knowing that theft, collapse, fire, or a drunken fight below can rip the night open without warning. And still, the worst part may not be the dirt itself. It may be the way Rome normalizes it. The city makes inequality feel architectural, as if some people were simply born for courtyards and others for stairwells. Temples shine, statues gleam, speeches praise order, virtue, and destiny. Yet the poor body moving through the city experiences another Rome entirely. One built from carrying water, swallowing humiliation, avoiding sickness, tolerating smell, and hoping bad luck chooses another doorway. Civilization from this angle is not a clean marble face. It is a polished mask tied over a sweating, overcrowded, deeply uneven city. That is why the difference between rich and poor in ancient Rome is so disgusting. Not because the poor were dirty and the rich were clean, but because cleanliness itself was distributed by power. One class lived closer to smoke, noise, waste, risk, and exposure, while the other built an identity around seeming untouched by all of it. The filth was real. The insult was deciding who had to remain inside it. Rome could move water across great distances, organize vast trade, and project authority across continents. Yet inside the capital, countless ordinary people still spent each day wrestling the most basic problems of human life, in full view of those who benefited from the system. If you were poor in Rome, the city never let you forget your place. Every staircase reminded you. Every queue reminded you. Every meal, every smell, every public toilet, every patch on your clothing, every dangerous flame, every cracked wall, every glance from someone better fed reminded you. Wealth was not only comfort, it was distance from constant bodily compromise. It was the privilege of not feeling every part of the city with your own skin. That may be the clearest divide of all. The rich experienced Rome as a possession. The poor experienced it as contact. So when people imagine ancient Rome through white marble, neat togas, and imperial grandeur, they are usually seeing it from the safest side of the street. Most Romans did not live inside a postcard. They lived inside crowding, labor, smell, and uncertainty. They lived one missed payment, one illness, one fire, one shortage away from disaster. The empire promised greatness, but greatness looked very different depending on whether you stood beneath a painted ceiling or under a leaking roof. In that gap between display and reality, you find the true city, brilliant, powerful, impressive, and for the majority of its people, relentlessly foul.